And welcome to SAVEDNews TV. Today we have a news story coming your way, but before we do that, we need to take care of our housekeeping with the Copyright Act of 1976, and it states that the Copyright Act of 1976 under Section 107, allowances is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, teaching, education, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by the copyright statute that might otherwise be considered infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. Well, thank you so much. Since we've taken care of our housekeeping, let's get into this article. 3 former Minneapolis police officers found guilty for violating George Floyd's civil rights. This is coming from CNN, and it is written by Julia Jones and Christina Markvoss. St. Paul, Minnesota. Former Minnesota police officers Tou Thao, J. Alexander Kueng and Thomas Lane was found guilty for violating George Floyd's civil rights by the federal jury in St. Paul, Minnesota on Thursday. The 12 jurors, 4 men and 8 women, found Lane, Kueng, and Tou guilty of depriving Floyd of his civil rights by showing deliberate indifference to his medical needs as former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin knelt on Floyd for more than 9 minutes on May 25, 2020, ultimately killing him. The jurors also found Tou and Kueng guilty of an additional charge for failing to intervene to stop Chauvin. Lane, who did not face the extra charge, testified that he and Chauvin twice to reposition Floyd while restraining him, but was denied both times. Violating a person's civil rights is punishable by a range of imprisonment up to life term or death penalty, depending upon the circumstances of the crime and the resulting injury, if any, according to the Department of Justice. Federal sentencing guidelines suggest the officers could receive a lesser sentence. The charges stem from the officer's actions or lack thereof as Chauvin pressed his knee into the neck and back of Floyd, who was handcuffed and lying on his stomach on the pavement. Both rookie officers held down Floyd's torso and legs respectively, while Tou stood nearby and kept the crowd of upset bystanders back. The case quickly gripped the nation's attention 2 years ago when a bystander's video showed Chauvin kneeling on Floyd's neck as the 46-year-old man pled he couldn't breathe. Floyd's last words became a rallying cry during the summer of the global protest against police brutality and racial injustice. Chauvin was convicted last spring of murder and manslaughter in the state trial and was sentenced to more than 22 years in prison. Lane, Kueng, and Tou will face a state trial in June on charges of aiding and abetting in the killing, which was pushed back so the federal proceedings could take place first. They have pled not guilty in those charges. As part of a plea agreement, Chauvin pled guilty in December to the federal civil rights charges related to Floyd's death and restraint of a teenager in a separate incident. He now faces between 20 and 25 years in prison. Prosecutors requested that he be sentenced to 25 years in prison to be served concurrently with the sentence from his state trial. The 3 remaining officers' federal trial began on January 24th. Prosecutors argued Floyd could have survived the arrest, but that the 3 officers, despite knowing the amount of force that was being used, chose not to intervene and save Floyd's life, as he repeatedly complained that he could not breathe under Chavin's knee. It wasn't a split second use of force like a gunshot, Assistant U.S. Attorney Manda Sterich said during closing arguments, referring to Tou and Clegg's extra charge of not intervening to stop Chauvin. Not 30 seconds, not a minute, several minutes, 569 seconds. The officer's defense attorney argued their client did not willfully fail to help Floyd, with Tou's lawyer saying in closing arguments that just because something has a tragic ending doesn't mean it's a crime. Attorneys for Kueng and Lane pointed out their clients had insufficient training and were subordinate to Chauvin, who was a longtime veteran of the force. We do not need commanders to tell us that if someone has seniority over you, you listen to them, Lane's attorney said. Earl Gray told the court Tuesday, it's common sense. You don't have to intend to harm Mr. Floyd, Assistant U.S. Attorney Leanne Bell countered during the rebuttal argument Tuesday. They just needed to know they could take certain actions under the law, and they failed to do so. Darnina Frazier, the now 18-year-old girl who recorded the cell phone video of Floyd's death, testified she was accompanying her cousin to the Cup food store when they encountered officers and a man on the ground who was saying, "I can't breathe." I didn't see George Floyd resist at all, Frazier told the court, but added that Chauvin remained on top of him. Frazier testified she saw Floyd's nose bleeding as he became unresponsive and then unconscious. Each of these three officers took the stand to testify about their thoughts and actions during the restraint, a stark contrast from Chauvin's silence during his state trial. Kueng and Lane were the first two officers to respond to the Cup food store on that day after reports that Floyd tried to use a counterfeit $20 bill. They later helped Chauvin restrain Floyd. Keegan held down Floyd's torso while Lane held his legs, and Tou held back the group of bystanders shouting at the officers to get Floyd off. Tou, the first of the three to testify, told the court he assumed that the other officers on the scene were taking care of Floyd and that his role transitioned to crowd and traffic control. He testified that he was aware that Lane and Keegan were new officers and said that while he saw Chauvin put his knee on Floyd's neck, it was not uncommon to see Minneapolis officers use a knee when making an arrest. When prosecutor asked Tou during cross-examination why he didn't tell Chauvin to get off of Floyd's neck, he said, "I think I would trust a 19-year veteran to figure it out." Keegan told jurors last week that he deferred to Chauvin on what to do during an arrest, as other officers did in certain situations as well. Since Chauvin was the senior officer on the scene with more than 15 years of experience, Coogan testified that he was stressed and could not tell how much pressure Chauvin was using with his knee, adding he believed Floyd was still breathing when emergency responders arrived. He told prosecutors during cross-examination that while he did not have much experience with handling large individuals who were resisting arrest, he was not aware of training of a technique using the leg. Lane, the second rookie officer, testified he tried to de-escalate the situation outside of Cup Foods, and that when Chauvin arrived, he either asked or cut in front of me, and later informed Floyd he was under arrest for forgery. Lane testified He asked Shavens twice if he could reposition Floyd during restraint because he was worried about excited delirium, which he defined as basically an adrenaline overdose. And Shaven said no. During cross examination, Lane said he started CPR about 5 minutes after Kueng said that he could not find a pulse, adding that ideally CPR should be started immediately after a pulse is not found. All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. We pray that you have a blessed and prosperous day. Tell us in the comment section, what do you think of the verdict? All righty then. Thank you. Goodbye.